Hello viewers, and welcome to the latest entry of the LOTR LCG Progression Series, a production by Cardboard of the Rings, the bi-weekly podcast about the Lord of the Rings, the card game, which is a living card game by Fantasy Flight Games. My name is Mitch.
And I'm Matthew.
And today we're going to be taking a look at the very first of our Against the Shadow scenarios. This is the Steward Sphere, so before we get started, Matthew, why don't you introduce us to our story?
Our heroes arrive in Minas Tirith with news of victory at Caer Andros and a message for Lord Alcaron from Faramir. Upon arriving at the city, they learn that Lord Alcaron is traveling on important business north in Anorion. Even so, the heroes are soon furtively summoned to the White Tower by none other than Denethor, the Steward of Gondor himself. Word has come to Denethor of the heroes' bravery in the defense of Caer Andros, and he's learned the heroes have the confidence of Lord Alcaron. In Denethor's mind, such trusted new arrivals are perfectly suited for a special task of a clandestine nature. In the privacy of the steward's inner chambers, Denethor asks the heroes a delicate favor. He fears that a conspiracy has taken root within the walls of Minas Tirith, a cabal under Mordor's bidding that seeks to usurp the stewardship and deliver Gondor to Sauron. He asks that the heroes discover the truth of this matter.
Alright, so now that we've caught up from where we left off when we last played Heirs of Numenor, let's go ahead and take a look at our player decks. So starting with myself, you're going to notice a dramatic difference from what I'm normally playing in this video. So there's no Dane Ironfoot, there are no dwarves on my side of the table. Instead, I'm going to be playing the new Outlands deck, so I have here Lewin the Fair to be able to play all the different spheres of Outlands allies. I've got Theodred to try and accelerate Hirluin's resources, and I've got Barivor as one of several means of providing card advantage, which is going to be oh so important because Outlands starts off weak, but finishes extraordinarily strong. I've got some healing effects I don't normally use, as many Outlands characters as possible, and then a few effects that are very specific to this scenario, specifically Asvaloth and Thror's map. We're going to be introducing the mechanics unique to this scenario in just a moment, but being able to go through as many active locations in one round as humanly possible is of the utmost importance in this scenario. And apart from that, I've got Peace and Thought to give me even more card advantage, gaining Strength to do even more resource acceleration, and then some other classics. But what are you running, Matthew?
While Mitch's deck is a radical departure, I think, from decks that either one of us have run before, mine is still largely similar to previous decks, mainly that I'm using Baragond, Legolas, and Glorfindel. Because his deck is going to start relatively slow, I'm hoping that my deck can sort of stall a little bit in the early game, tangle with most of the enemies that come down, yet still being able to provide a little bit of questing prowess with either Legolas's response or Glorfindel's 3 willpower. Arwen will hopefully help a little bit with that. I'm super excited to have the Gondorian Shield in my deck, which will make Baragond pretty unstoppable. I hope I get that in my opening hand or relatively soon. And then sort of the host of Spirit and Tactics events you've come to know and love from my side of the table. So hopefully that's enough to help us uncover the conspirators.
Well, keeping with recent tradition, why don't I go ahead and start by making Matthew our first player. Let's verify that our player decks are indeed shuffled, and before doing our encounter setup, let's go ahead and draw our opening hand of 6 cards.
My hand isn't the greatest, so I think I'm going to take a mulligan. And substantially better on the second turn, or on my mulligan rather, so I couldn't be more happy.
Alright, and my hand is a little bit strange. I've got a ton of resource acceleration, so as soon as I can get a little bit of card advantage, I'm sure Barivor is going to help with that. I've got a lore event that can help with that. I've got a double ambush, so hopefully things are going to be looking up very soon, and this is going to be a pretty strong start. But now that we're both happy with our opening hands, why don't we go ahead and take a look at what makes the Steward Sphere so unique. So, question Quest Card 1A reads Setup, create the Underworld deck. And this is going to be a concept unique to this scenario. So taking a look at what's eventually going to be our active location here, this has Underworld value of X, which is going to be 2. The Underworld deck is 12 different cards. 3 of them are going to be beneficial objectives, and the other 9 are all enemy cards that we've already seen in some of the Heirs of Numenor scenarios. So a location begins the game with these Underworld cards underneath it. As soon as that location is explored, or the encounter deck tells us to, then those Underworld cards are revealed. So the location kind of pops, and then the enemies spill out and we have to deal with them. The second part of this quest card says to remove Roots of Mindalluin, another location, from the encounter deck and set it aside out of play. And that'll be a location we see in Phase 2. And something very special is we have to shuffle all villain cards and randomly set one aside out of play without looking at it. All of the other cards go away, and then we do the same thing with plot cards. So this is something that adds a ton of replayability to this scenario, because each and every time that you play it, you're going to be encountering one of 3 different plot objectives and one of 3 different villain cards. So they all have different effects. Some of them synergize with one another, but it should make for a lot of fun. So why don't we go ahead and flip to Quest Phase 1B, and this doesn't have any quest point requirement. It says, when revealed, search the encounter deck for the 4th star and make it the active location. Of course, we shuffle the encounter deck, and that's going to be this location here. So 5 quest points. As soon as it leaves play, we each draw a card, but as soon as it leaves play, we also have 2 cards to deal with that are more than likely going to be nasty enemies. And very special, this says Forced. After the active location leaves play as an explored location, place 1 resource token on this quest. And if there are 4 or more resource tokens on Conspiracy, then we advance to the next stage. So if we contribute 100 willpower to the quest, that's not going to do it. We need to get rid of active locations. But with that said, why don't we go ahead and shuffle our encounter deck, and also go ahead and shuffle our Underworld deck. And because we're not revealing any encounter cards, let's go ahead and put 2 Underworld cards on our active location here. So I'm going to go ahead and page these down so that they're underneath our active location. It might look a little bit goofy in this scenario because there's going to be a lot of face-down cards on the table. To determine which of our plot and villain cards we have to go up against, I've gone ahead and found a random number generator. So for our top row of plot cards, let's go ahead and generate a random number. And that is going to be number 3. So I'm going to go ahead and put this face-down plot card underneath our Quest Phase 2, because that's when that comes into play. And let's go ahead and randomly generate one more number for our villain. And that is also going to be 3. So let's go ahead and put that under Quest Phase 3. So let's take these remaining 4, and I'm just going to go ahead and put them down out of play under our global tab. So at this point, we're finally ready to start the game. Shall we go ahead and take our first turn?
Well, I think I'm ready, and I'm certainly ready to commit 100 willpower to the quest from my side of the table, so let's see if I can do it.
Alright, so why don't we go ahead and do our very first resource phase. So, resources and draw 1 card. And what are you doing for planning?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is play a Gondorian Shield for free.
Fantastic.
Second thing I'm going to do is play a, what is this called? Spear of the Citadel for free.
Awesome.
And then the next thing I'm going to do is play a Light of Valinor.
Alright, so I don't know if it could get too much better for you. Baragon starts the game with Defense 6 and Sentinel and deals damage to enemies when he defends them. So, pretty solid, I think. I'm going to go ahead and trigger Barivore right away to make myself draw 2 cards. So we've got a lot of healing at our disposal. I'm going to go ahead and do a Daron's Runes to draw 2 additional cards, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. after I get rid of one of my healers. I'm going to spend both of my leadership resources to do a Steward of Gondor on Hirluin. I'll trigger that to add 2 resources to him. I'm going to go ahead and spend both of those resources to do a Gaining Strength, so that gives him 3 resources. And I'm going to go ahead and do 1, 2, 3 to do a Anphalos Herdsman, so all of my Outlands characters get +1 hit points. And I'm also going to do a Hunter of Lamedon. So after I play Hunter of Lamedon, I reveal the top card of my deck. If it's Outlands, I add it to my hand. I otherwise discard it. So revealed, the card is a Knights of the Swan. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my hand. And that is going to be it for me.
Well, suddenly what I thought was a pretty fun first turn on my side seems a little less fun compared to your turn. But I suppose I will send Glorfindel to the quest for 3.
Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and do Theodred and Hirluin. There aren't too many enemies in the encounter deck, so I suppose... I think I'm just going to go ahead and send a total of 2, which will bring us to a grand total of 5. I wouldn't mind not popping our Underworld location right away. So let's see what we're up against. So encounter card number 1 is going to be return all brigand enemies engaged with players to the staging area. There are none, so this is going to end up gaining Surge. Encounter card number 1 is going to be Storehouse, so Underworld 1. So we've got to immediately take 1 card from our Underworld deck that, it's worth noting, does not replenish at any point, and add that to the staging area. And then encounter card number 2 is going to be end the quest phase without resolving the quest. So we've got our 2 cards. We do not make any progress because we don't resolve the quest. And looks like there are no enemies in play. We don't have any means of adding tokens to locations, so I suppose this is the round.
Okay, that's a pretty frustrating card.
Yes, it certainly can be. So let's go ahead and Control R to refresh, and if you'd be so kind as to make me first player. Let's do our resources and draw 1 card. Before I go on, I've already noticed a couple mistakes I just made. So in the previous round, when Theodred committed to the quest with Hirluin, his purpose of being in this deck is to add resources to Hirluin. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and before we transition out of the refresh phase, I got ahead of myself here. I'm going to spend that 1 resource I left on Barivor in order to do a Peace and Thought. So I'm going to go ahead and exhaust her and Theodred in order to draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards total. Now that I've hit my resource phase, I'm going to go ahead and add 1 of those to each of my characters and trigger that Steward of Gondor. I'm going to go ahead and spend 2 resources off of Hirluin, and I'm going to put out 2 copies of Knights of the Swan. So all my Outlands characters also get +2 attack strength, so Hirluin is attacking for a total of 3. I'll spend 1 off of Theodred for an Errand Rider, and I'm going to spend 2 resources to put into play Envoy of Pelargir, which is going to be able to add 1 resource to Theodred's resource pool. And in fact, I think I'm actually going to do that 1 more time to put a 2nd into play. And that is going to be my planning.
Well, after your stellar turn, I'm not going to play a darn thing.
Alright, well, I suppose for committing characters to the quest, my major concern is getting 1 of the 5 enemies in the encounter deck, and then popping these Underworld cards and having a bunch of enemies interplay. Both of our threats are pretty low, but at the same time it would be crappy to get stuck with some nasty enemies.
Indeed.
But I think I'm going to go ahead and do 3 committed to the quest. And how about you?
Well, all I can do is 3, so there we go.
Alright, so why don't we settle for a total of 6, and in the very near future, hopefully that should be changing considerably. So, encounter card number 1 is going to be City Street, which surges. So let's go ahead and replace that, or add another 1. to another city street which surges. 2, this is going to be a knife in the back, so randomly select one ally controlled by the first player, which is me, if able, and it's going to be X damage to one of your heroes, where X is equal to that ally's attack strength. So why don't I go ahead and magic up my number generator. So I've got my number generator on the screen. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 allies. So starting from the Amphilos herdsman and working in a little arc like that, let's generate a number between 1 and 7, and the number is going to be 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That is going to be one of my Knights of the Swan. So it's got 2 attack strength, and that means I've got to pick one of my heroes to take 2 damage. I think I will pick Theodred. And then let's go ahead and get rid of this card. Our second encounter card is going to be, when revealed, reveal 1 card from the Underworld deck and add it to the staging area. And this is going to be yet another Surge. So let's see what we get from the Underworld deck. And this is the worst enemy we could have possibly seen. So the Umbar Assassin, when he engages a player, that player has to deal damage to a hero. And then, of course, this Unwelcome Discovery surges, and it's going to surge to...
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Another Unwelcome Discovery. This is pretty ridiculous. Our new card is going to be one of these clues.
Okay, well, that's not too bad.
Right, so this just gets discarded, and then Unwelcome Discovery is going to end up surging. So, hopefully our last encounter card is going to be return all brigand enemies to the staging area. It didn't return any to the staging area because there's one sitting there, so let's replace that with a Underworld Dissident.
Alright.
It's just going to be attacking for 3, but 3, 7, 9, 11, looks like we're up against 13 threat.
Oh my god.
So I definitely could ambush a character into play, but I think I'm going to hold on to all of those, so since we're up against 13, looks like we're going to gain a massive 7 threat. And I thought this scenario was going to be so simple. So we have no option for travel. Hopefully I'm going to end up coming across Asphalloth in the near future. And for engagement, we don't have to take the Umbar Assassin, but one of us does have to take this Dissident.
Well, I will certainly take the Dissident. I think I can handle him quite nicely.
Alright, so why don't I go ahead and bring him down to you. And then at the beginning of combat, we've got 2 archery damage to deal with. I've got a healer in my hand that'll help lessen the blow, and I'll probably be playing that next turn if I don't happen to come across a mount for Glorfindel.
Okay, well, I'll put both on Glorfindel because he's got the largest pool of hit points, so let's do that.
Okay, sounds like it makes sense to me. So for combat, let's do that 1 shadow card for the Dissident. How do you want to block?
I will do Baragond.
Alright, so he takes 1 point of damage right away. He's currently attacking for 3. There is no shadow effect, so his 3 attack does not crack that 6 defense.
Yeah, and that's a pretty nasty location as well.
Sure. And for returning fire?
Legolas and Glorfindel for the win.
Alright, so the Dissident is going to be killed. Legolas's ability triggers, and that's going to be 2 progress on our 4th star. So let's get rid of that shadow card. And I think that about does it for the round. So why don't we go ahead and Control R to refresh. I'll make you first player, and let's go ahead and do resources and draw cards. So I just so happened to draw a little bit of salvation for questing.
Alright, well I will spend 2 for an Arwen, and
Awesome.
That'll be it for me.
Well, great. For me, I'm going to go ahead and trigger my Steward of Gondor straight away. I'll use my Errand Rider to transfer 1 resource from Theodred to Barivor. I'll spend both of her resources to do a Warden of Healing, and then I'm going to go ahead and spend 2 resources off of Heirluin in order to do an Aether's Swordsman, which is probably my absolute favorite of all the different Outlands allies, so they all get +1 willpower. And before I use my last resources, why don't I go ahead and trigger Barivor on myself to take a look at what I could possibly draw. and I ended up actually getting a wizard friend for us. So that could possibly help with questing, and then that could definitely help us get rid of that assassin sitting there in the staging area. But that is going to close out my turn. So for committing characters to the quest, who are you going to be sending?
I'll send a total of 5. And then I guess for Arwen's ability, I can transfer it over to your side, so whomever you like.
Okay, I think I'll pick Hirluin, so he can be 2 defense and 5 hit points. So you're doing 5 for me. I'm going to go ahead and spend 1 resource off of Theodred to do a sneak attack.
I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me.
And I'm going to go ahead and put Gandalf into play. For his ability, I'm going to go ahead and trigger that on the Umbar Assassin.
Okay.
That'll end up making him pretty easy fodder for Baragond, and I think I'll save my little Warden of Healing to get rid of some of that forced engagement damage. But committing characters to the quest, I'll do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
And so would you like to throw Theodred's resource onto Glorfindel, I suppose?
Sure. And that's going to bring us to a grand total of 16. So, why don't we see what we're up against? Encounter card number 1 is going to be Storehouse, yet again. So let's do our 6th card from the Underworld deck. I'll go ahead and page that down. And let's go ahead and do our final encounter card, which is going to be another Underworld 1 location. And this is when revealed, place the top card of the Underworld deck face down underneath the active location. So there are only going to be 4 cards left shortly. And let's go ahead and do it like this. So I'll send that to the back, and I will send that to the back. And that is going to be questing. So we're up against 3, 4, 5, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we're going to end up making a single point of progress.
Okay.
And if it just so happens that we kill one enemy, then that'll pop open our Underworld location here. So for travel, we've still got this location stuck here. We're not really able to do anything about that. For engagement, do you want to optionally engage the Umbar Assassin?
Certainly.
Alright, so you've got to pick one of your heroes to take 3 points of damage. And I suppose Gandalf bounces back to my hand.
I'll put the damage on Legolas.
Okay, and I think I'll trigger my Warden of Healing during that action window to pull 1 point off Glorfindel and 1 point off Legolas.
Whoops, I accidentally removed a resource by mistake. Okay, perfect.
And then that's going to bring us to combat. So for that archery damage, why don't I go ahead and do it on, I suppose, Barivor? Or 1 point on Barivor and 1 point on this errand writer here.
Okay. And I will have Baragond defend against the assassin once he gets a shadow card. Yep.
And
I will choose not to use the Spear of the Citadel. That way we can make some progress with Legolas.
Alright, so let's go ahead and flip that shadow card. This is going to be if this attack destroys a character, remove all tokens from the current quest. And it, of course, does not, since he's got that 6. And for attacking back...
Legolas and Glorfindel for 6.
Alright, so more than enough. The Umbar Assassin is going to be killed, and Legolas's ability is going to trigger, so that's 1, 2 progress on the 4th star. It is going to be fully explored, and that means we put 1 resource token on our current quest, so we're 1/4 of the way there. And let's see what we get for these Underworld cards. So putting them in the staging area, let's go ahead and flip those. So our first one is going to be a Lothernok Bandit. So this is going to steal resources when it engages with us. Second is going to be the Zealous Traitor, which is very dangerous for my deck. And third is going to be a Pickpocket, which is going to steal resources and cause us to discard cards at random. So there's still 2 more clues, but now there's a whole host of enemies sitting here. But I think that brings us to the end of yet another round, so why don't we go ahead and Control R to refresh, and if you'd be so kind as to make me the first player, I'll go ahead and draw 1 card, and I'm gonna do my resources. I think right away I'll trigger Barivore yet again on myself to draw another couple of cards, and I'm gonna spend 2 resources off of Heirluin in order to put another Aether Swordsman into play. So now all of my Outlands allies are getting +1 attack, +1 hit point, and +2 willpower. I think I'm going to go ahead and do a very good tail, choosing to exhaust both of my Envoys of Pelargir in order to discard the top 5 cards of my deck. And let's see what we get. I think I'm going to go ahead and pick the Herdsman and the Knight to put into play, and then I'm going to go ahead and discard all the other cards. For questing, I'll be able to commit quite a few. I think right off the bat, I'm going to spend 1 resource off of Theodred in order to do a sneak attack.
I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me.
And once again, I'm going to go ahead and pick Gandalf. For his ability, I'm going to do 4 points of damage to this Lothar bandit, and that is going to be removing that from play. So help give us a little bit of an edge over all that threat in the staging area. I'll do 4, a total of 10, 14. Theodred is going to make 15. I'll give him his own resource, and I'm gonna go ahead and send my other 2 guys here for good measure, bringing me to 19. Unfortunately, we don't have an active location to explore away, but what are you gonna send?
I'll send 5.
Okay. So that's gonna be a grand total of 24.
And then I suppose Arwen can do her defense back over to Heirluin.
Okay. So we might as well see what we're up against. In counter card number 1 is going to be another Underworld location, so our sewers. We've only got 3 more cards left in our Underworld deck. And in counter card number 2 is going to be this Knife in the Back. So it seems that once again I'm the first player, so let's go ahead and see what I have to deal with. I've currently got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 allies. So let's go ahead and randomly number a number between 1 and 12, working in this little arc that I draw on the screen here.
Well, let's hope it's not Gandalf.
And that number is going to be number 1. So that is going to be one of my Amphilos Herdsmen. So it's currently got attack strength of 2 because of my Knights of the Swan. So I'm going to go ahead and put that damage on, I think, Barivore. Really, the only direct damage we have to worry about now that we've gotten those 2 Knife in the Back out of the way is this Zealous Traitor, and he can only affect allies. So that is going to be our staging. We're up against 3, 6, 8, 11, 13, 15, 17, total of 19. So we're going to make 5 progress, which fizzles. So it doesn't actually do anything. And for travel,
we have to go to the city streets.
Right, so we're basically forced into going to this pretty boring city street. Let's go ahead and just collapse some of these cards, and then that is going to lead us to engagement. So since I've got a big swarm of allies, do you want to take Zealous Traitor?
Sure.
Alright, so I'll move him down to you, and it looks like Arwen takes 1 whole point of damage. I think I'm going to trigger my Warden of Healing to remove Arwen's damage.
Okay.
And I suppose a point of damage off of maybe Glorfindel.
Okay.
And then I'll take the Pickpocket. And for combat, let's go ahead and do some shadow cards. Of course, that one's supposed to go to me first. And for dealing with my attack, the defending player has to discard 1 resource and discard 1 card at random. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of a resource off of, I think, Barivore. Well, I'll pull it off of Theodred, and let's go ahead and do a random discard. And Faramir was my 1 discard, a 1 copy card, which would have been pretty fantastic, but not that big of a deal. For defense, I'm going to go ahead and pick Heirluin, and let's see what we get. So if this attack is undefended, which it's not, remove 1 token from the current quest. So here Lewin, with his 1 point of defense, is going to take no damage. And how about your guy?
Well, he technically had 2 with R1. But I will do the, I was about to call him Defender of Ramas. I will do Baragond for mine.
Right, so let's see. Shadow card is going to be defending player discards his hand. Do you have a means of canceling that?
Yeah, but I honestly don't care. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. 6 eggs in one hand, half dozen in the other. I guess I'll go ahead and play it. Though I actually wouldn't care if I lost my hand.
I guess you'd be losing the hasty stroke either way, so...
Right.
Alright, for returning fire, I'm going to swing with my Hunter of Lamedon for a grand total of 3, which kills my pickpocket. And how about yourself?
Legolas and Glorfindel.
Alright, so more than enough. The Zealous Trader is going to be killed. His shadow card is gone. That means 2 progress on the city street, which is explored, and that is 1 more resource token on Conspiracy.
And you didn't do the spear damage on the Zealous Trader, though it didn't really matter.
That's right. I think the heat must be muddling my brain here. But we've seen the end of yet another round. No active location, unfortunately, but let's go ahead and refresh. I'll make you first player. I'll draw 1 card, and let's do some resources.
I will spend 2 for a Trollshaw Scout.
Okay.
And that is it.
Alright. I will trigger Barivore 1 more time on myself. I forgot to pull Gandalf back to my hand. I'm going to do 2 resources off of Barivore to do Asphalloth on your Glorfindel. And this is a card I've never really played with before, this map attachment here. And our goal is going to be to explore location during questing, and then once we have our travel action, we can make another location active, and then use Glorfindel to possibly explore that away. But that really isn't doing us too much good at the moment. So apart from that, I think really the only other thing I'm going to do on my turn is I'll spend 2 resources to put my 3rd and final Envoy of Pelargir into play. That adds 1 more resource to Theodred, and maybe I'll also spend that 1 resource to do a 2nd Errand Rider, making sure to put my Wounded One on the top of the stack. And that is going to be it for my turn.
Okay, so I will send 5 to the quest once again.
Okay.
And I guess we can again give Arwen's defense to Hirulin.
Sure.
Lewin, I keep saying his name wrong.
I suppose I'm going to go ahead and do 3, 6, 9, 10, 12... I think I'm just going to go ahead and stop at 12.
And then before we reveal cards, I'm going to go ahead and trigger Asphalloth and snipe the city street there.
Okay, so city street, 2 progress, it's going to be gone, so we can travel to any of these locations. And I think I'm also going to go ahead and trigger that Warden of Healing. And why don't I go ahead and pull 1 point off Legolas and 1 point off of Theodred. So for staging, encounter card number 1 is going to be Local Trouble. So this is going to be attached to the hero with the highest threat cost without a copy of Local Trouble attached. So I think that is going to end up being either Barivore or Baragond.
Yep.
And I suppose neither of us really have any way of getting rid of this once it's in play. Should I stick it on Barivore? I'm pretty much done with drawing cards.
Okay, sure.
So it's definitely not ideal, but I guess I'm going to go ahead and put that on Barivore now that my deck is functioning reasonably well.
Okay.
So encounter card number 2 is going to be a 3rd knife in the back. I thought there were only 2, so you are the first player this time.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and randomly number generate either 1 or 2.
Well, let's hope for Arwen, because she's 0, but she'll be discarded, I suppose.
So I keep closing out of it, but now I've got the random number generator up once again. Number between 1 and 2. The result is 1, so it is going to be Arwen.
So that adjusts my willpower down to 3.
Right. Looks like I didn't actually calculate a total for our willpower, so at the present moment we're sitting at 18. And we've at least uncovered all of our encounter cards. So let's go ahead and get rid of that and tally it up. So we're up against 3, 6, 8, and 10, which means we're going to end up making 8 progress, but that of course does not do anything. But for traveling...
Might as well go to the sewers, I suppose.
Sure. Let's go ahead and make that active. So I'll go ahead and set that right there. And unfortunately, there's not really anything else for us to do during the round, so shall we refresh?
Sure.
Alright, so Control R. I've got to boost up my threat by an additional 1 because of local trouble, and considering that some of our plots either deplete our decks faster than normal and we lose once we hit 0, or if we, of course, threat cap, we lose, I'm feeling a little bit nervous that we haven't made very much progress, but let me draw 1 card and do resources. So I will spend 1 resource off of Barivore in order to do Thror's Map, and I suppose I'm going to go ahead and stick that on Hirluin. And this will allow us to use our travel action to make a second active location, so hopefully getting us 2 resource tokens in 1 round. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and skip on my remaining actions, and what can we see from you?
I'm going to pay 2 for Gondorian Spearman.
Okay.
I'm going to pay 2 to put a spear on him.
Awesome.
There it goes. And I'm going to pay another 2 for the Return of Arwen.
Great.
And that's it for me.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the quest phase. So we're only up against 7 threat at this point, so I suppose I will send a total of 10, maybe I'll do 12.
Okay.
And are you doing your standard?
Yep, I'll do my 5.
Alright, so let's make it a total of 17 that we've sent. I think I'm going to send another few points, so I'm going to have us sitting at 20. And I think I'm fine with sending 20, so let's see what we reveal. Encounter card number 1 is going to be City Street, which surges to an Underworld Dissident. And our second encounter card is going to be another Underworld Dissident. So for Underworld locations, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 total. So it looks like these guys are both going to be attacking for 6, which means that Gondorian Shield is actually looking pretty handy. But that is going to be our staging. We're up against 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, so we're going to make 5 progress. So that's 1, 2, 3, which means the sewers is going to be explored, which gives us 1 resource token. And then let's go ahead and flip, and this is going to be a Zealous Trader. And this might cause a little bit of trouble just because it deals damage to each ally. So I think what I'm going to do at the very end of the quest phase here, I'm going to go ahead and spend 1 resource off of Theodred for 1 more sneak attack.
I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me.
And once again, I'm going to go ahead and pick Gandalf, and I'll put that damage directly on the Zealous Trader. So as soon as we move out of the quest phase, Gandalf is going to bounce back to my hand. For travel, we have to go to the city street.
Right. And then I will go ahead and trigger Asphalah.
Alright, so that is going to be 1, 2 points. So it is explored, and that is going to be our 4th and final resource token. At this point, we're going to have to reveal our set-aside plot card and add it to the staging area. So let's see what we got. And it is going to be at the end of each round, raise each player's threat by 2. So for once, I'm hoping that you've got Elrond's Counsel in your deck.
I do, but not in my hand.
Alright, well, at least it's in there, and I've got some Istari that should hopefully be helping me. So we're going to be raising our threat by a grand total of 3 at the end of every round. Could get pretty scary, but we'll have to see how things go. Now that we've unveiled our plot, why don't we go ahead and move on to Quest Phase 2B, and this reads, make Roots of Mindoluin the active location, returning any other active location to the staging area, and it's the same thing as before. So once an active location leaves play, we add a resource token to the quest, and once we have 4 or more, we move on to the next stage. So I'm going to go ahead and make this active. This is going to be Underworld 1, and it causes each location in the staging area to have additional quest points. So let's go ahead and put one of our 3 remaining Underworld cards under that location, send it to the bottom, and that is going to lead us to engagement. So why don't we go ahead and just do 1 to me and 1 to you, since Sentinel is all over the table at the moment, and let's deal out some shadow cards. So for the one attacking me, do you maybe want to use your Spearman?
Yes, I will use my I'll use my Gondorian Spearman on your side.
Okay, so looks like he's going to take 1 point of damage from the Spearman. He's going to take 1 point of damage from Spear of the Citadel, so he is killed despite his mighty 6 attack strength. And the discarded shadow card is not that big of a deal, but just another location we don't have to deal with. And how do you want to handle yours?
Baragon will defend mine.
Alright, so it immediately takes 1 point of damage. It's swinging for 6, and the shadow card is, if this attack is defended, remove 1 token. Of course it's not, so Baragon takes no damage.
Okay, and then to swing back, I will use Legolas and Glorfindel.
Alright, so more than enough. The Dissident is killed, the shadow card is gone, and that's going to be 2 points on Roots of Mindoluin. So at the end of the round, why don't we go ahead and refresh. I'll make you first player, and then we have to boost up our threat by an additional 2. And I'm currently at 42, and you're not too much better off at 39.
Yep.
But why don't I go ahead and draw a card? I'll do my resources, I'll trigger my Steward, and what are you going to do for planning?
I will do 2 for a Defender of Ramas.
Okay.
And then 1 for a Vassal of the Windlord.
Alright. For me, I'm going to go ahead and do a Daron's Runes. So I will draw 2 cards. I'll discard an unnecessary copy of Steward, and that Daron's Runes. I'll spend 1 resource off of Baravor for another Herdsman. Get that in play again. I'll spend Theodred's resource for another Errand Rider. Let me send that to the bottom of the stack. And I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to do a dry cast of Gandalf.
I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me.
Dropping my threat down to 37. And that is going to be it for me.
So for questing, I will send my usual 5.
Okay, and I will do 3, 6, 7, 10, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and I think that is going to be good. So grand total of 23, and I assume you're just kind of by default throwing Arwen's ability over to Hirluin?
Yeah.
Okay. So 23 committed to the quest. Let's see what we get. Encounter card 1 is another local trouble, and I guess this is going to get stuck to Baragon.
Sure is.
Alright, so that is definitely unfortunate, seeing as how we can't really handle any threat raising. Encounter card number 2 is going to be 1 more Sewers. So let's do our second to last card in the Underworld deck. I'll go ahead and send that to the bottom. We're up against 3, 6...
Oh, 1 more, 1 revealed effect.
Right, so let me do our very last Underworld card underneath the Roots of Mindoluin here. So that is going to mean we're up against a total of 10, so we're going to end up making 13, which is more than enough to explore the Roots of Mindoluin. So that is going to be gone. That's going to be 1 resource token for us here, and let's see what we pull, hoping that we see some clues. We've got a pickpocket, and we've got this, which is going to give us 2 resource tokens, which is absolutely fantastic, because this is going to allow us to basically win the game.
Yep, I'll go ahead and exhaust Glorfindel to take control of that.
Okay, so why don't I go ahead and pass this on down to you? And immediately we have to add it to the victory display and place 2 resource tokens on the current quest. So that's going to be 1, 2, and now as soon as we explore one more location, we pop that final quest card, the big baddie comes down, and hopefully we'll be able to dispatch him pretty handily.
So should we travel to a storehouse so Asphalloth can take care of it?
Definitely. So let's go ahead and make a storehouse active, hoping there's nothing too nasty inside of it.
Yep, I will trigger Asphalloth.
Alright, so that's going to be 1, 2 points. It is going to be explored, and we're going to gain 1 resource token. So we immediately have to pass quest phases before anything else happens, and at this point we have to reveal our set-aside villain card and add it to the staging area. So let's see who we get. Hopefully not someone that raises threats. And this is gonna be not bad at all. This is Telimnar's Bane. When he attacks, we discard the top 3 cards of each player's deck, and after a player plays an event, he makes an immediate attack against the first player. So he's not very feint friendly, but at least he doesn't raise threats. Now that we're on this final quest phase, all it says is we shuffle the Underworld deck, although it currently has 0 cards, back into the encounter deck, and it's got 15 quest points. So we have to kill Telimnar's Bane before going any further. But since we left off in the middle of this, let's go ahead and reveal and add to the staging area yet another pickpocket, which really isn't too big of a deal. And I think that is gonna be that.
Okay.
I suppose at this point, before we move out of the travel phase, I'll use my Thrower's Map since I bothered including it in the deck, and I'm going to move, I think, a Sewers to the active slot. It's not something that Legolas could bust open, but at the same time,
sure.
Maybe we will have to deal with a little bit less threat in the staging area, whatever.
Yeah.
So, for engagement, do you want the villain? Or...
Absolutely, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And I guess Kirluin can attack ranged, so that'll probably help. But I'll go ahead and bring Telimnar's Bane down to you. Why don't I optionally engage a pickpocket, and then when we do engagement checks, I guess you're kind of stuck with the other pickpocket.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Let's go ahead and start our combat phase. So 1 card for the pickpocket, 1 for... Oh, whoops. Looks like we actually ran out of cards in the encounter deck. And since the quest phase is the only time that you reconstitute the encounter deck if it's depleted of cards, looks like these 2 just aren't going to have a shadow effect, so...
Okay, so then I will defend my pickpocket with my Gondorian Spearman.
Okay, so immediately he's going to take a couple points of damage, but since that's when he attacks, you've still got to do a random discard.
Yep, so I will lose 1 resource from Baragond. And let's random discard. I lost Light of Valinor.
Alright, well, certainly doesn't change anything. Pretty... Well, I guess it wouldn't really matter at this point if you lose that or not, so...
Yeah. And then for the villain, I will have Baragond defend.
Okay, so I guess that's going to boost up your threat by 1.
Yep.
And he's going to take 1 point of damage.
You know, let me take that back.
Okay.
There's no reason why Defender of Ramas can't do that and avoid the threat gain.
Sure. So we've each got to discard the top 3 cards of our deck. Looks like I'm going to get rid of Warrior of Lothar, a Gandalf, and a Peace and Thoughts.
Well, at least it wasn't an Elrond Council, I suppose.
Right. And I suppose nobody's playing any events, so there's no immediate attack. He's got no shadow cards, so Defender of Ramas is not killed.
Yep.
For me, I've got 1 pickpocket. I suppose I'm going to go ahead and block with, I think, one of my unwounded errand riders. So it's going to end up taking 1 point of damage. I've got to do a random discard, which ended up being an unnecessary copy of Steward of Gondor, and I'll get rid of a resource from Kirluin's resource pool for attacking back.
Let's see. I needed a total of 9 damage. So Legolas is 3. Vassal makes it 6.
Kirluin would make it 9.
Yeah, sure, I can use my Troll Shot Scout, but I would still be short 1. So, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, here, Lauren, here, Lewin's. Oh, you just exhausted.
Right.
Okay, I didn't catch that. So, okay, perfect.
All right, so Telimnar's Bane is going to take exactly 9 points of damage. He is going to be killed. Unfortunately, your vassal is going to be gone. I suppose Gandalf is going to swing back and kill that pickpocket, and that means there are going to be no enemies in play. Since Legolas participated in that attack, that's going to be 2 progress on our underworld location here. And I suppose at that point, we might as well just kind of close down the round. So let's go ahead and Control R to refresh. We've got to boost our threat up by 2 because of Poison Councils. Let's draw some cards and do some resources. At the end of the round, of course, Gandalf leaves play, and then I think I'm going to go ahead and spend 2 resources off of Hirluin to do a Gaining Strength. Very weak draw at this point of the game. And I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 in order to put yet another Gandalf.
I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me.
Into play, and I'm going to drop my threat down to 35.
Okay. Is that it for you?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to spend 2 to put an Unexpected Courage on Hirluin.
Okay.
And that's all I can do.
All right, so I suppose that's going to be powering him up. For committing characters to the quest, this is when we want to make our mad dash to the end. So I'm going to go ahead and do...
Well, because I can only send 5, I mean, Legolas could make it 6, but I'm just going to send my 5, even though you're technically committing first.
Sure, and I think I forgot to use Warden of Healing last turn, but I'm going to go ahead and trigger him now to strip, I guess, 1 point off Theodred, 1 point off Baravor. For committing characters, I'm going to do 4, 7, 10, 13, 15, 17, 20, 24, 25, total of 28, readying Hirluin.
Okay.
So, going to be a total of 33, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what we get. So, encounter card number 1, I think the encounter deck is going to shuffle itself, is going to be a Zealous Trader, because of course now it has all the Underworld cards. Encounter card number 2 is going to be Return all Brigand enemies to the staging area. That is going to gain Surge to a Pickpocket. So we're going to be up against 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 threats.
Okay.
That means we're going to end up making 23 progress. So 1 progress on our active location, which is going to explore that, and then that's going to do 22 progress tokens out of the 15 required to satisfy our final quest phase. So that location is gone, and the final card is going to be yet another Underworld enemy, this Lothar Bandit. So, at the present moment, we've got 22 out of the 15 required. We have finished the confrontation. There is no villain in play. This plot card didn't end up causing us to hit 50 threats, so Matthew, the developers have told us that the entire Against the Shadow arc is supposed to have a much more pronounced narrative focus than any other scenarios we've seen thus far, so Matthew, why don't you wrap up this adventure?
With the champion of the Cabal destroyed and the conspiracy seemingly vanquished, Denethor's relief was palpable and his reward substantial. Yet, as the White City resettled into tentative content, a quiet unease remained with you. Subtle clues had not been reconciled, and certain witnesses were no longer to be found. Despite the undeniable power of its defeated champion, the ambition of the conspiracy had seemed greater still. During the weeks that followed, you probed quietly for additional answers. Little by little, you made progress until you suddenly found yourselves near the heart of darkness. Like a viper trapped in its nest, coiled and venomous, the hidden mastermind, who indeed had survived, launched a desperate strike on our heroes. But as so many foes before them, the assassins from Harad were unsuccessful. With his champion defeated, his best killers dead, and his identity on the cusp of being unveiled, the secretive servant of Mordor chose instead to escape the city with his few remaining retainers. Upon learning that his shadowy nemesis still drew breath, Denethor urged the heroes to take up the pursuit. And so the heroes' hunt began, equipped with fast horses and the seal of the Steward. Unfortunately, the secretive villain had a substantial lead, and you found yourself following his shrewd course for near a fortnight. Leading north and then westward along the foothills of the mountains, the enemy's trail had taken you to the edge of the Druidan forest, a wild place with a reputation for danger.
Alright, so now that we've covered our story, any final thoughts about the Steward's Fear scenario?
So when this quest first came out, I think I made the comment on the Cardboard of the Rings Facebook page that I thought this quest was the Hills of Emmenwheel 2.0, and I got quite a bit of flack for that comment, but by and large, I stick with my comment. I will say that I played this quest a couple of times. This is the most difficult and closest attempt that I've ever had. You and I played it together. I think my first playthrough, we absolutely stomped it. I played it with some other buddies, and we relatively stomped it. This one was a little tougher. I think it's because we had, 4 surge cards in a row on our opening round. It's... This playthrough, I will say, was the most exciting, the most fun of all of my Steward Sphere playthroughs, but most of them have been a snooze fest. It's explore a location, a wimpy enemy pops out, you defend it, you kill it with 1 character or 2 characters, you go on. And so by needing the resource tokens instead of progress tokens, it sort of artificially forces the game to take somewhere around 8 rounds or so, give or take if you have tricks like the map or Asphaleth or whatnot, to get through the first 2 quest cards. It's just not a quest that's my favorite. Now, certainly, I absolutely think this quest has way more theme than the Hills of Emmenwheel. That's why I call it the Hills of Emmenwheel 2.0. I'm not calling it the Hills of Emmenwheel, the copy or the clone, right? It's certainly better. It's a notch better. But, back in the Hills of Emmenwheel days, I gave the designers a lot of respect for trying something different. We'd had battle quests with Conflict at the Karok. We'd had largely just sort of willpowering through. And the Hills of Emmenwheel really wanted to capture exploring Middle-earth and looking for clues for Gollum and exploring various locations. I think the problem, however, is that location exploring is the weakest aspect of the game. And again, armchair quarterbacking here, I'm not sure how I would make the location phase or the travel phase more exciting in this game, though I've not given it a ton of thought. But it's just kind of boring. It's just one of those things you do to clear out threat, and that's really its purpose. So this quest does put a nice little twist on it with the underworld deck, and things can be popping out as you're going and exploring the city to find the clues about the villain, and all of a sudden someone jumps out of the alley or something and attacks you. So I think this quest is a theme home run, but that doesn't change the mechanics. It's explore, 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 and it's just kind of boring. The enemies aren't that exciting. The one new enemy for this pack is still relatively weak, and if you keep a handle on the staging area, his attack never gets boosted up that much. He, I think, got up to 6 in our game, and of course, Baragon took care of that handedly. So, on the one hand, I don't think it's as bad as Hills of Emmenwheel, but on the other hand, I give the designers less slack now than I did in the very first cycle. I don't find it to be that fun overall, even though I think this was far and away the best playthrough of this particular quest that I have had. So, dare I repeat a phrase, this quest is probably a mixed bag for me. So, what do you think, Mitch?
Well, I guess this is definitely conceptually a very interesting scenario. It's kind of fun going into these locations and finding these bad guys in there. So the denizens of these different locations pop out and kind of battle you once you explore their territory. The problem arises where the structure of the game starts to be your enemy. So something that kept us from progressing very quickly once we could make 20 or so progress tokens surplus is the fact that you can really only travel to one location per round. So even though we could do Legolas to explore stuff during the combat phase, even though we had Asphaleth to snipe things out of the staging area, the only time it ever counted was when there was an active location. So I included the Thrower's Map in this deck, trying to maybe get the occasional turn where you could get 2 progress tokens, but apart from that, there's just 2 out of those 12 Underworld cards which give you quest acceleration in the form of additional resource tokens. things. And I've been playing the scenario before where it felt like the encounter deck wasn't exactly beating me, but it was just kind of choking me to death or strangling me to death, where you have, say, 20 threat worth of locations in the staging area, or even if you're about to make a bunch of progress, you end up pulling that don't resolve the quest phase this turn round. So it does feel very slow. I've certainly never had an Underworld Dissident get anywhere near 6 attack power before, so that was pretty interesting. Once we saw that our threat was climbing pretty quickly due to that one really unsuccessful quest, those local troubles combined with the Poison Council was a pretty nasty combination, but this is just kind of a slow, drawn-out death at the hands of the encounter deck, as opposed to being utterly pummeled. And previously, when that really strong, in air quotes, villain comes out, it's almost been just play a feint and then destroy the villain in, one fell swoop. So in this case, we didn't even have a shadow card to deal with. This was interesting. It was pretty tense in that I felt like we might lose, but it wasn't necessarily a sound victory. It was like a frustrated, I can't believe the encounter deck actually is, managing to scrape together a win type of victory.
Sure. As far as the villain goes, I think the closing part of our story tells us that this isn't actually the real villain. So if we want to sort of, whether this was intended by the designers or not, if we want to retcon the ease of the villain, well, maybe they're not that bad because it's not the real baddie behind the conspiracy. I've noticed that some folks on various discussion boards have noted, well, maybe the enemy isn't all that tough because, as the closing story told us, he's part of the conspiracy, but he's not the head honcho. So I don't know if the designers intended it to be that way, but you're absolutely right. Because the game forces us to take what could be up to 8 different turns to get the 8 resource tokens on the quest cards, you should have built up a sizable army that you can take care of, chump block the enemy, and destroy him in one turn, I would imagine. So, yeah, I think the boss fight is a little bit anticlimactic, but the story, I think, accounts for it to some degree. The only other thing I have to say is I just didn't feel like my deck functioned all that well. Part of me wanted to say, oh, you finally have all your outlands out. Will you please start getting me some card draw? I had a bunch of doubles in my hand, which is why when I would have lost my hand, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. I had other Arwens, more Spears, more Light of Valinors, and whatnot. And then, of course, the turn I was thinking that you drew local trouble. So I never really felt like I got cooking, didn't get a lot of those Spirit cards or Unexpected Courage early enough. But, I'm not sure that I did sort of hold down the fort until you got going, but all in all, it worked out, and I'm glad we succeeded.
Well, all in all, it sounds like Matthew and I don't have the most favorable opinion in the world of the Steward sphere, so certainly if you have some thoughts that you'd like to share in the comments, we always love reading those. As with any video, thank you guys so much for checking this out. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel if you have not done so already. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at the new hero and 9 new player cards of the Druidan Forest Adventure Pack, so we'll see you again soon.